I once swore I would never go back to that house again. But then, one evening in early December, when my little girl looked at me with those wide, hopeful eyes and asked, "Mom, do I have grandparents?" I knew my heart couldn't stay silent any longer. My daughter Lily was only 8. Still believed in magic. Still thought Christmas was the time when even the most distant families could find their way back to each other. I stayed quiet for a long moment before nodding, though inside, I felt like I had just stepped over an old, rusted, thorn-covered boundary. I got divorced 3 years ago. My mother never called. My father only sent a cold one-line message. Everyone shares some blame in a breakup. I thought that made it perfectly clear. At that moment, I was no longer part of their world and they were no longer part of mine. But Lily didn't know any of that. To her, they were still grandparents. 2 people she believed would be overjoyed to see their granddaughter knocking on their door on Christmas Eve, carrying a little box of cookies and a bright smile. I didn't have the heart to take that dream from her. 3 weeks before the holiday, she asked me, "Do you think they'll like me?" Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. I hesitated, then replied, "Of course they will." But my throat tightened, like I had just traded a piece of my truth so she could have a few days of hope. I told myself I was doing it for Lily, that maybe, just maybe, this one time they'd see her the way I do, sweet, creative, thoughtful beyond her years. Maybe I was wrong about them? We set out on the morning of December 24. I had spent the entire week preparing, scraping together every dollar from my savings, picking up extra shifts to buy Lily a red velvet dress with white lace trim and a new pair of flats. She carefully wrote out handmade cards for everyone, Grandma, Grandpa, Aunt, Uncle, each one with uneven printed letters full of love, decorated with crayon drawings. I saw her clutching them to her chest like she was afraid someone might tear them. "Do you think they'll hang my drawings on the wall?" she asked, as I tied her bow in front of the mirror. I smiled, smoothed her hair, and said, "Of course they will, sweetheart." My old SUV rolled along snow-covered roads, Christmas lights twinkling through the windows, but all I felt was a tightness in my chest. That house didn't remind me of warmth or laughter. It was a place where judgment always came softly, like a cold wind, but strong enough to freeze the heart. When we arrived, Martha, my mother, opened the door. She looked the same, hair tightly curled, lips painted deep red, a smile that never reached her eyes. "Patricia, long time no see," she said, then turned to Lily. "So this is her?" She leaned down, placing a hand on Lily's shoulder, like she was inspecting a package that had just been delivered. "I'm Lily," my daughter said brightly, her cheeks rosy from the cold. My mother replied, her eyes flicking from the salt stains on Lily's shoes to the mud-streaked hem of her dress. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. The Christmas tree sparkled in the corner like something out of a home magazine, not a single ornament out of place. My father, Henry, sat in his usual armchair by the fireplace, the TV on low, holding a cup of coffee. He didn't stand, just gave a slight nod, like someone acknowledging a bank statement. "Didn't think you two would actually show," he said, his tone flat like a weather forecast. Lily shyly waved, "Hi, Grandpa." Her little hand, tucked inside a cream-colored knit glove, trembled slightly. He just looked at her. Papa said nothing. I stood still, my forced smile struggling not to shake. I had prepared myself for this. But nothing really prepares you for the cold indifference of people who used to be home. But Lily remained steady. She stepped forward, holding her little paper bag of cards, and whispered, "I brought gifts for everyone." Her voice was clear, like a tiny bell, soft but strangely loud in the museum-like silence of the room. I looked at her, my heart bursting, part pain, part pride, part hope. Just a sliver. She laid each card on the coffee table like sacred treasures. The one for Grandma Martha had a hand-cut pink heart glued on. Grandpa Henry's had a drawing of a Christmas tree, and underneath, 2 people holding hands. I didn't dare ask who the second figure was, but my heart sank when I realized it looked a lot like me. The daughter he once called the biggest disappointment of his life. "I made one for Uncle Peter, too," Lily said, handing a card to the man sitting across the room. Peter, my younger brother, had left home at 20, only recently returning after a failed marriage. He took the card, nodded, but didn't open it. "Thanks," he muttered, his voice dry. I looked at him, caught his eyes quickly turning away, as if the past was still alive in every corner of this cold, polished room. Lily didn't notice. She continued her tiny mission, walking over to my cousin Chloe, who was lounging on the sofa scrolling on her phone. When Lily handed her the card, she didn't even look up, just mumbled, "Oh, thanks, kid," before returning to her screen, the tapping of her nails louder than my breaking heart. I sat, frozen, clutching a lukewarm cup of tea, too afraid to speak. Part of me was furious, part of me afraid, but more than anything, I felt powerless. This house, these people, still the same, everything in its place yet somehow completely hollow. After she had handed out every card, Lily returned to sit beside me, her eyes still bright, whispering, "Mom, I think Grandma's about to read my card." I looked toward my mother. She held the card in her hand, but instead of opening it, she placed it down next to the crystal lamp and turned away like it was a piece of junk mail. At that moment, my father put his coffee cup down, walked toward the tree, and rummaged underneath it. He pulled out a neatly wrapped square box, shiny blue paper with a bold red ribbon. He held it up, turned to Lily, and handed it over without much emotion. "This one's for you," he said evenly. "Your name's on it." Lily's mouth dropped open. She reached out, accepting the gift with eyes that lit up like catching a falling star. A flicker of hope sparked in me. Maybe, just maybe, he had changed his mind? She sat down on the rug, carefully peeling back the tape, unfolding each crease. I could hear every tear of paper, every breath she held. As she opened the lid, the whole room seemed to pause. Then, her face froze. The smile slowly faded. Her small shoulders stiffened. Lily reached into the box, feeling around an empty space. She looked up at me, eyes uncertain. The gift box was empty. I was speechless. No note, no toy, no explanation. Just an empty box, wrapped in shiny paper and bright promises. And then my father chuckled. A short, cold, cruel sound. "Kids these days, always dreaming too big," he said, looking at Lily like she had made some ridiculous mistake. "Life doesn't hand you things just for showing up." It felt like the air had turned to stone around me. Lily hadn't cried yet, but her eyes were shimmering. I was about to speak when Chloe smirked, dropped her phone on the table, and said, with a biting tone, "She's just like her mom, always thinking being pitiful means people owe you something." I turned my head, my gaze sharp as stone. "Chloe, that's enough." "Oh, come on, did I lie?" she shrugged. "Patricia, why did you even come back? To let this poor kid believe that families are full of magic?" Lily said nothing, but I saw her hands tighten around the empty box, hugging it to her chest like she still hoped something warm, something real, might be inside. I wanted to pull her into my arms and walk away from that place forever. But I also knew, if I did, I'd be teaching her that every hurt should be buried, that silence is the answer to pain. I had lived like that for over 30 years, and I swore I wouldn't let Lily learn the same lesson. She looked up at me, her eyes wet but not breaking. I saw her swallow her tears, in a way that hurt more than if she had sobbed. "It's okay, Mom," she whispered. I still have a gift for Grandpa." And right then I knew this wasn't over, not here, not today. Lily remained still, holding the empty gift box as if it might become something else if she just waited a little longer. Her eyes no longer sparkled the way they did when she first walked into the house, but something inside them hadn't completely faded. A small flame, weak but stubborn to the end. I leaned down beside her, about to wrap her in a hug, but Lily shook her head gently. She set the box aside and reached into her coat pocket. I felt my heart tighten. When she pulled out a neatly folded piece of paper, holding it with both hands like it was a treasure, the entire room fell into silence. "Grandpa," her voice was light as air, but clear, "I have a gift for you." My father, Henry, was still holding his coffee cup. He froze for a moment, raised an eyebrow, and leaned back in his chair, his face a mixture of surprise and sarcasm. "A gift for me?" he smirked. "Hope it's not one of your mom's lectures." I clenched my hands together, trying to stay calm. But Lily didn't flinch. She stepped forward, both hands still extended, trembling slightly but steady. "I made it myself. It took 3 days to finish," Lily said. Her eyes locked on his like she was speaking to a friend, not someone who had just given her an empty box. Chloe, Peter, and my mother all turned to look. No one said a word. Henry slowly set his coffee down and reached out to take the paper. I held my breath. He unfolded it with one hand, his face showing no emotion. But as his eyes scanned the inside of the paper, something seemed to shift. I couldn't tell what it was, just that his shoulders stiffened and the familiar furrow in his brow vanished. His gaze softened, no longer sharp as usual. Instead, there was a flicker of confusion, like he was seeing something from a life long past, a memory that hadn't fully faded. No one spoke. The ticking of the wall clock suddenly became strangely loud. I couldn't see the paper from where I sat, but I saw how he looked at it, as if it had reminded him of something important he'd forgotten for too long. He stood up, still holding the paper. His steps weren't quick or firm, but there was something different in every movement. "Dad?" my mother called, surprised. He didn't answer, just walked out of the room, down the hallway toward the kitchen, and disappeared behind the oak door. No door slam, no explanation. Peter frowned. Chloe looked at me and raised an eyebrow, as if waiting for an answer I didn't have. I turned to Lily. She stood still, hands clasped, eyes still fixed on the door where Henry had vanished. "Mom," she asked softly, "did I do something wrong?" I knelt beside her, pulling her into my arms. "No, sweetheart. You did the right thing. You're braver than I am." Lily didn't say anything more. She just gave a small nod and leaned her head on my shoulder. I didn't need to ask to know her heart was swirling with unanswered questions. I didn't know what my father saw in that paper. But later that evening, while I packed our things and Lily folded old wrapping paper, I found her little drawing, a duplicate she made, just in case the original got ruined. It was a crayon picture, an old man sitting at a long wooden table next to a smiling blonde girl. On the table was an apple pie, the kind my mother used to bake for the holidays, before everything turned cold. At the bottom, Lily had written in big rounded letters, "I hope you'll be happy again. Mom says you used to laugh a lot." I didn't know if he read those words, but I knew if anything could reach my father's heart, frozen for decades, it was the kind of pure sincerity Lily had given, expecting nothing in return, just hoping someone would remember how to love. And sometimes, just a simple reminder like that is enough to awaken a part of us we thought was lost forever. We didn't see Henry return to the living room that entire evening, not once. Not when everyone moved to the dining table with the usual overcooked turkey, not when my mother poured wine and told stories no one really listened to. Not even when Lily quietly picked up stray bits of wrapping paper and carefully folded them, as if trying to patch up a torn day. No one brought up what happened. No one asked how Lily felt, and no one looked at me with even a hint of empathy, as if staying silent and pretending hard enough would make the truth fade away like morning fog. Chloe stayed glued to her phone. Peter did the dishes like a machine. My mother said goodnight in her usual flat tone, then closed her bedroom door like it was any other Christmas night. But it wasn't, not at all. I looked at Lily, curled up in her blanket on the sofa, hugging the same old teddy bear she took on every trip. Her wide eyes stared into the hallway where Henry had disappeared. I didn't need to ask what she was waiting for, and as much as I wanted to comfort her, I couldn't promise he'd come back, because truthfully, I didn't believe he would. The next morning, snow still fell softly. The sun hadn't risen high yet, but I was already up, packing in silence. I didn't tell anyone we were leaving, just left a brief note on the kitchen table. Thank you for having us, Patricia and Lily. Lily didn't ask why we were leaving early. She just walked beside me quietly, her new black shoes sinking slightly into the thin snow covering the stone path. I loaded the suitcase into the trunk, opened the passenger door for her, and started the car. Lily looked back at the house through the window, her clear eyes, once untouched by disappointment, now quietly searching. We didn't talk much on the drive home, just soft music from the radio, blending with the rhythmic sound of the windshield wipers. I thought about asking her about the drawing, why she chose to make it, but I stopped myself. Some things, I realized, don't need to be put into words. She had given him the most genuine gift. One of memory, of reminder, of a piece of the past long forgotten. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, I sat by the window of our small city apartment. No thick snow, no trees wrapped in sparkling lights, but it felt safe. I thought about my father, a man I had only ever seen as strict, harsh, and distant. Did he keep the drawing? Or throw it away the moment he left the room? I didn't know. Maybe I never would. Until 3 days later. When I opened the door to grab the mail like I always did, there was a small box on the doorstep. No return address, just 4 neat handwritten words. For Lily. I brought it inside, my heart racing in a strange way. Lily was coloring at the table, and her eyes lit up when I handed her the box. "Who's it from, Mom?" she asked. I shook my head. "I don't know, but open it." Inside was a small wooden music box, painted brown, its details delicately hand-carved. When Lily turned the crank on the side, the melody of Edelweiss began to play. Gentle, soft, and so unexpected it gave me chills. There was a small note tucked underneath, just one messy line of handwriting. "Thank you for reminding me of her." No signature, no other clue, but I knew. I knew exactly who had written it. No need for proof, no need for confirmation. Lily held the music box to her chest, her eyes suddenly softer than usual. "Mom, do you think Grandpa remembered?" she asked quietly. I sat down beside her and nodded. "I think he did, sweetheart. You helped him remember." Lily said nothing else. She just sat there, turned the little crank once more, and listened as the melody filled the quiet apartment. I didn't know how much my father had changed, but I knew that in some small moment, Lily had reached the part of him that could still feel, still remember, still listen. And that alone made the trip worth it. Since the music box appeared, Lily seemed to have something of her own to hold on to. She didn't talk much about it, didn't ask questions, only placed the little box beside her bed every night, turned the crank once, and listened quietly. The song Edelweiss played gently, like the final breath of the day, touching the silence of our small home and softening everything heavy. I didn't press her, partly because I wanted to preserve that delicate feeling, as if touching it might break the spell, partly because I was caught in my own circle of unspoken thoughts. Someone had sent that music box. Someone had written that note. And I knew. No one but my father had that shaky, blocky, awkward handwriting. I had grown up seeing it in his books, in the notes taped to the fridge. Always that same handwriting, always that same feeling. Clear, but distant. Only this time, there was no distance. That night, after Lily was asleep, I sat in the kitchen with a cup of cold tea, still turning the note over in my mind. "Thank you for reminding me of her. Her, someone Lily had never met, but who lived in her heart through my stories. Evelyn." My mother never spoke of Evelyn. As I grew up, she was like a name crossed out of the past. My father rarely mentioned his mother either, except in passing comments at dinner when he couldn't hold back his complaints. My mother would have never put up with this lifestyle, or she taught me to endure, not to be soft like this. And yet Lily, somehow, had brought back the memory of someone this entire family had tried to forget. The next morning, as I was making breakfast, the phone rang. A strange number. I almost didn't answer, but my hand moved on its own. Patricia? A deep male voice, with hesitation. Yes, who's this? It's Peter. I was surprised. Peter? What's going on? He paused for a few seconds, then spoke quickly like he was afraid he might change his mind. Dad wants to see Lily. I nearly dropped the cup in my hand. What? He didn't explain much. Just said, if you're okay with it, bring her to the house Sunday afternoon. No one else knows, he wants to talk. I stood frozen for a while. All these years, my father had never once asked anyone to come. And now, he wanted to see Lily, the child he once handed an empty box. I said I'd think about it. I put the phone down and stared at the milk spreading across the table without moving. All that afternoon, I couldn't stop wondering, was this just another emotional trap? Would he repeat that same cruel indifference again? But then I looked at Lily. She was sitting by the window, coloring flowers on a card. It's what she always did to calm herself. And I realized maybe the right thing now wasn't shielding her by avoiding everything, but letting her face it, the way she had before. On Sunday, I drove Lily back to the old house. The snow had melted, leaving patches of ice on the sidewalk. I stopped at the end of the street, my heart full of hesitation. You ready? I asked. Lily nodded, her face more serious than usual. I think Grandpa needs someone to listen. I took her hand, warm and steady. When we stepped onto the porch, the door opened almost instantly. Not my mother, not Peter. It was Henry. No coat, no coffee in hand. Just an old man, eyes sunken, hair grayer than last time, and a face, finally, without annoyance or confusion. Hello, Lily, he said slowly. Hi, Grandpa, Lily replied, her smile small but real. He stepped back, opening the door wide. Come in. I have something I want to show you. And just like that, I knew. Something had changed. Not a fairy tale ending, but a door, gently opening. We stepped into a strangely quiet house. No sound from the TV, no clinking of dishes, no scent of food like usual. The house was still tidy, but today something felt softer, as if the old harshness had been gently wiped away by someone. Henry led Lily to the living room. I started to follow, but he turned to me, not harshly, just gently, and said, Patricia, your brother's in the backyard. Maybe you'd like to go out there for a bit? I nodded, a little surprised by how light his voice was today. Then I stepped back, letting the two of them have the room to themselves. Lily sat in the chair next to the fireplace where Henry usually read his newspaper every morning. He sat across from her, the music box placed on the table between them. Neither spoke for a while. Then Lily was the one who broke the silence. Do you listen to this song? She asked, gently turning the crank. The soft melody filled the air, each note falling like a drop of water into a still pond. Henry nodded, his eyes fixed on the spinning lid. I have. And I've kept it by my bedside these past few nights. Lily smiled. Mom said Grandma Evelyn liked this song. He took a deep breath, then exhaled slowly. She did. She used to sing it while folding laundry. Her voice wasn't great, but I always thought it was the most beautiful sound in the world. The room went quiet again. Lily said nothing, just reached into her small backpack beside her. She pulled out a folded sheet of paper, the edges slightly wrinkled from being held too long. Then she handed it to him, her hand slightly trembling, but her gaze steady. This is the original, she said. The one I gave you on Christmas was a copy. I wanted to keep this one. He took it, unfolding each crease carefully, as if something delicate and precious lay inside. When the drawing fully opened, I saw him pause. From the window I could see part of the picture. 3 people, hand in hand. Henry, tall and broad, holding hands with a woman with curly hair and bright eyes. Evelyn. And between them, Lily, her face lifted in a smile. At the bottom of the drawing, a simple line of text read, "I hope one day you'll smile again, because Mom said Grandma used to make you laugh a lot." I saw Henry lean back in his chair, his eyes still on the paper, but this time there was no coldness or confusion, just stillness, and something quietly breaking behind his eyes. "She's been gone 10 years, he said, his voice raspy. "Since then, I haven't drawn, haven't sung, haven't told stories, I just kept going." Lily tilted her head. "But you still remember her." "I do." He smiled faintly, a crooked smile, as if surprised by the sound of it. "But I forgot how to show it. You reminded me." A long pause followed. Then Lily asked softly, "Do you ever think, if she could see you now, she'd be sad?" The question made Henry go silent, his hand on the paper tensed. Then relaxed. "Maybe she would," he said, quieter than a whisper. "And that's what scares me the most." I turned away, feeling the sting behind my eyes. Henry placed the drawing back on the table, right beside the music box. "Do you want to take this back?" he asked. Lily shook her head. "No, you keep it. I think she'd like being near you." Again, silence filled the room. But this time, it wasn't cold. It felt like a soft blanket wrapping around two souls, finally reaching each other after too many years apart. Before we left, Henry walked us all the way to the door. There were no empty words, just eyes that no longer looked away, and a hand that gently touched my shoulder for the first time as he whispered, "She's like her mother, but better." I nodded, unsure what to say. Lily turned back and waved. "Goodbye, Grandpa. Next time, I'll draw more for Grandma." He smiled, a real smile, and in that moment I realized, some gifts are never wrapped in shiny paper or tied with red bows. They are memories, hope, and quiet reminders that even the most weathered hearts can be stirred, if someone kind enough dares to reach in. A week after that afternoon, as Lily sketched in the soft golden sunlight spilling through our kitchen window, I received an envelope. Unsealed, no return address, only my name written neatly in handwriting I could never mistake. That same handwriting, awkward, firm, as if the writer was unfamiliar with expressing feelings in words, let alone capturing them in ink and paper. I stood still at the doorstep for a long time, holding something that felt both feather-light and heavy as stone. As I opened the letter, the music from Lily's little box echoed in my mind. Edelweiss, now more than a melody. A bridge between now and something long asleep in the past. There were only 3 lines inside. "Your mother was right about you. That little girl is wonderful. I hope you're doing okay." No greeting, no apology, no sign this was a beginning or an end. But that made it all the more powerful in its quiet way. I read it 3 times, each word ringing like an echo of something I had longed for. Not forgiveness, but recognition. He didn't say sorry, but he wrote, "That little girl is wonderful." And for me, that was enough to crack the wall I'd built over the years. Just enough for light to come through, even if only a sliver. I placed the letter in the drawer beside my bed, where I keep my most treasured things. A note Lily wrote in preschool saying she loved me more than toast and strawberries. A birthday card from my grandmother when I turned 18. And now, this short note from a man who never knew how to show love, but finally spoke. That night, as I read Lily her bedtime story, she turned the music box's crank and looked up at me. "Mom," she asked softly, "do you think Grandpa is still sad?" I looked into her eyes, still as clear as that early winter morning when she stood in his living room, her hands trembling as she handed over a paper gift to a man she had only just met. "I think he's learning not to be," I said with a gentle smile. "Because of you." Lily didn't reply, She just held the music box to her chest the way children hold on to secrets, something warm adults may never fully understand. Since then, we haven't heard more from Henry. No calls, no texts, no sudden appearances like in the movies. But every weekend, a small package would arrive, never with a return address. The first was a pad of colored drawing paper, the next a set of high-quality watercolor pencils, with a note, "For your next pictures." Another time, it was a photo book of national parks Evelyn once loved visiting. And most recently, a hand-carved wooden picture frame, empty, unmarked. But I knew right away, it was meant for the Christmas drawing Lily gave him. Lily never asked why he sent them. She simply hung the picture by her desk and whispered, "Grandpa's smiling again, Mom." I know it. I can't say for sure he truly smiled, but I know he's starting to remember. And that's the beginning of every change. The story between my father and me isn't a reconciliation. I don't expect a long conversation, a warm dinner, or overdue hugs. But when I read those few short lines, I understood he finally saw me. Not as a rebellious daughter or a burden, but as a mother raising a child who knows how to love, forgive, and create change with nothing more than kindness. Lily didn't just change him, she changed me too. She reminded me that sometimes what we need isn't victory or resolution, but simply space to be heard. A soft acknowledgement, light as air, yet strong enough to ease even the longest winters. And in our little apartment in the city, with no grand tree or church bells ringing, I knew that Christmas, for the first time in years, truly touched my heart, not because of what we received, but because of what we had the courage to give. Someone once asked me why I brought Lily back to that house, a place filled with heavy memories, a place I once swore never to return to. I didn't have a clear answer then, but now, looking back, I think I understand. I brought her back not to reopen old wounds, not to seek approval from the man who once made me feel invisible in my own home. I brought Lily back because she needed to see that the world isn't only made of beautiful corners. She needed to know that some people are not easy to love, not easy to reach, and not always easy to forgive. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. Lily never wanted revenge. She didn't demand an apology or expect Henry to change. She didn't need praise. All she wanted was to give a genuine gift, a reminder of something once beautiful, and maybe still alive in someone long forgotten. When she gave him that drawing, simple as it seemed, filled with memory, hope, and unconditional affection, I saw what I hadn't been able to do for years, reach the remaining humanity in a man I thought time and loss had turned to stone. Henry didn't change overnight. He didn't become a warm grandpa or suddenly bring ice cream or tell fairy tales. But he listened in silence, sent small gifts, and most importantly, he showed he still felt. For someone like him, that alone was a big step. I remember his eyes when Lily said she hoped he'd smile again one day. For a second, I saw the man he used to be. The one who carried me on his shoulders in summer evenings, taught me how to toast bread without burning it, sat under the porch as my mother played the piano. That man never disappeared. He had just been buried under time, unspoken anger, and disappointment no one dared to name. And Lily, with a child's sketch and a simple line of hope, brought that memory back. Maybe that's why I believe now more than ever that kindness isn't weakness. It's the softest, most enduring kind of strength. A quiet bravery that doesn't shout or slam fists, but acts at just the right moment, from a pure heart. I don't know how Lily will remember that Christmas in the years to come. Maybe she'll think of the empty box, the heavy silence, the cold stares. But I hope what stays with her is the way Henry looked at her drawing, or the moment he wrote his first note to her. That's what's worth holding on to. Because sometimes it's not what we receive that makes something magical. It's what we're brave enough to give. I never wrote back to Henry, not because I was angry or didn't appreciate what he'd done, but because I knew some things don't need to be said. They've already been understood, accepted, and maybe are quietly growing into something else, slow but real. Lily still turns the music box each night before bed, but lately she doesn't just listen. She's started to hum along. Her voice is light as a breeze, off-key at times, but still she sings. And every time she does, I feel a little more at peace. I know my daughter will grow up without needing the walls I once built to protect myself. She won't learn to stay silent when she's hurt, or believe that she has to be tough to survive. She'll know that gentleness is a powerful choice, and kindness is a silent but sharp kind of strength. My story with my father might not be finished, but thanks to Lily, it's taken a different path. A new door has opened. Not wide, but just enough to let the light in. And sometimes just one ray of light is all it takes to illuminate a road we thought was forgotten. The story of Lily and me has shown me that in real life, what changes people isn't logic, but unconditional sincerity. A small gesture, a gift born from pure affection, can soften even the most hardened hearts. Kindness doesn't ask for anything in return, but it holds the power to shift the impossible. And sometimes all it takes is one child who believes in goodness to make the whole world just a little more gentle. What do you think of Patricia and Lily's story? Do you believe kindness can reach even the coldest hearts? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family and life. My name is Amanda. I'm 29 years old and I live in Portland, Oregon. I'm the second born in a pair of twins, arriving just 11 minutes after my sister Isabel. But to our parents, those 11 minutes were enough to crown her as the family's miracle, while I was just the shadow that followed. Since I was little, I've heard my mom proudly tell stories about Isabel's birth, how they waited so long to have children, how Isabel was a gift from God, a light in their darkest years. I, on the other hand, was born just minutes later, unexpected, almost unplanned. No one ever said it outright, but their eyes, the way they spoke of her with affection and offered me only a polite smile, told me everything I needed to know about my place. The difference was clear from kindergarten. In our first school play, I was Little Red Riding Hood in the starring role, and Isabel played a shrub on the side of the stage. But minutes before showtime, she started crying because she'd torn a corner of her costume. My parents rushed on stage to comfort her and missed my entire performance. Afterward, when I eagerly gave my mom a picture I'd drawn, she just patted my head and turned to praise Isabel for being brave enough to stand on stage even without much of a part. In elementary school, I poured myself into every test, always aiming for the top of the class. I joined the science club and did a solar energy project I was genuinely passionate about. When I brought home a first-place district medal, my dad glanced at it and asked Isabel if she had a good day at school. She said some kids teased her for wearing mismatched socks, and suddenly the whole conversation shifted to Isabel's emotional trauma. Still, I kept trying. In high school, I joined the debate team, competed statewide, and won the highest award in 10th grade. Isabel often skipped school because she felt overwhelmed by homework. Her grades were average at best, but my parents praised her artistic talent because she painted a few romantic watercolors and knew 3 guitar chords. I once told them I painted too and had sold artwork online, but they just smiled and said, "Don't compare yourself to your sister." What hurt the most wasn't the praise for Isabel. It was how they casually dismissed all my efforts. When I got accepted into the honors program, they said, "Amanda works too hard. She's going to burn out someday." Isabel got a C on her history test, and my mom comforted her. "A C is fine. Not everyone has to be good at everything." I was stunned into silence. One time, I won a scholarship to a Stanford summer program. My dad asked just one question: "Did Isabel get in too?" When I said no, he sighed in disappointment. I've lost count of how many nights I went to sleep with a hollow feeling, tears quietly soaking my pillow, wondering what I'd done wrong, when all I ever did was try to be a good daughter. As I got older, I saw more clearly that my role in the family wasn't to be loved, but to be the backdrop against which my sister could shine. I was expected to be understanding, to endure, to yield, because she's more sensitive than you. But who was ever gentle with me? I used to believe that if I was good enough, my parents would finally see me. But it turns out, there are invisible walls made of names, birth order, and misplaced expectations. Walls that no amount of effort could break through. I grew up in a house where love was distributed according to a scale I never had a chance to touch. And to this day, I still wonder, if I had been born those 11 minutes earlier, would everything have been different? I still remember that fateful Christmas Eve, cold, snowflakes drifting past the wooden window frames of our family home in Boise, Idaho. I had just finished my sophomore year of college with a near-perfect GPA. I didn't get the fanfare Isabel did when she debuted an abstract painting at a local gallery, but I still tried to keep a cheerful spirit as I came home for the holidays. That dinner, we all sat around the table with roast meat my mom had prepared. Everything seemed normal until my uncle, Richard, my dad's younger brother, raised his glass and chuckled as he brought up our birth story. Well, Tom and his wife were so shocked when the doctor said it was twins, they only planned to have one after all. I paused, knife in hand, mid-splice of a potato. I looked up and met his eyes. "What did you say?" I asked, my voice wavering. Uncle Richard looked a bit uncomfortable but kept smiling. "Oh, yeah. Isabel was planned and you were..." A little surprise. No one was prepared for two at once. The table fell silent. My mom gently touched his arm and quickly changed the subject, but I didn't hear a word after that. All I could hear was the echo in my head. Only planned for one. Isabel was the plan. Everything became crystal clear, like someone had flipped a switch and illuminated every memory from nearly 20 years in that house. I no longer needed to wonder why I always felt forgotten. The reason was so simple and so cruel, it made my chest tighten. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my old bed, staring at the ceiling, reflecting on my entire life. And in that moment, something inside me cracked. I no longer craved my parents' approval. I no longer wanted to make anyone proud. Except myself. After the holiday, I returned to college with a completely different energy. I stopped calling my mom when I aced a programming test. I stopped sending pictures of awards. Instead, I channeled everything into building my skills. And more importantly, building a life for myself. I earned a full scholarship to the computer science program at the University of Washington. I studied hard and enrolled in extra courses: artificial intelligence, machine learning, system security. I was no longer living in Isabel's shadow. I was starting to create my own light. After graduation, I was recruited by a young tech startup in Seattle called Nurix Labs. No one in my family asked about my new job, but I wasn't hurt. I knew my worth, and that was enough. 3 years later, Nurix was thriving, valued at hundreds of millions after a successful Series C funding round. I went from software engineer to team lead, and eventually, at 27, was promoted to director of software development. In a tech magazine interview, I was called the Heart of Nurix. I printed the article and quietly pinned it on my office wall. Not as the older daughter, not with anyone's permission, just as me. I bought a small apartment downtown and decorated it myself with a minimalist touch. Simple, clean, full of freedom. Every morning, as I stood by the window and watched the city wake up, I knew I was living a life I chose. No one had paved the path. No one got to define me. Isabel still regularly updates social media with photos from gallery shows and tea parties with her artist friends. My parents still interact, share, and comment with pride. I don't feel resentment anymore. I just no longer feel the need to squeeze myself into a family portrait that only ever had one subject. Now, I've learned that some wounds never heal, but we can learn to live without letting them define us. I'm not a shadow, I am me. With scars, with achievements, with everything I've overcome. And I know the next chapter of my life is only just beginning. I've always believed that if anyone in the family truly saw me, it was my grandmother, Grandma June. She was the only one who never called Isabel sweetheart in every sentence. To her, we were two individuals, not two parts of a comparison. Every summer, she would take us to her old farm in Bend, Oregon. There, I could shed the label of Isabel's little sister and simply be Amanda, the girl who loved reading under the pecan tree, who quietly listened to her grandmother's stories of youth. When I was in my final year of college, she fell ill. It wasn't a violent illness, but a lingering one, as if time itself was trying to keep her with me a little longer. Before she passed, she called me to her bedside, held my hand, and said softly, "Amanda, I know you've endured things no one has acknowledged. I can't change the past, but I can do something small for your future." She told me she'd set aside a savings account in her will for both of us, for our weddings, split evenly, not to be touched by anyone else. She emphasized that she wanted her youngest granddaughter to have something truly her own, not shared, not taken. I cried, not because of the money, but because after all those years, someone finally acknowledged my pain was real. The money was placed in a joint trust under both our names, temporarily managed by our parents until we got married. I didn't think much of it. I knew I wasn't planning on a wedding anytime soon. Isabel was different. After meeting Evan, a tall lawyer with smooth talk and perfectly pressed shirts, she declared he was the one. 3 months later, they were engaged. A month after that, the whole family was swept up in wedding planning. I received a gold-trimmed invitation at my office with my name printed in a flowery font. Mrs. Amanda is cordially invited to the wedding of Isabel and Evan at Silver Oaks Estate, Napa Valley. Alongside it was a lengthy guest list, a gourmet European menu, and a photo album from their Santorini engagement shoot. I blinked. Where did they get the money for all this? I didn't want to be suspicious, but something didn't feel right. I called my mom and asked her directly. She hesitated for a second, then quickly slipped into her usual sweet tone. "Oh, I meant to tell you after the wedding so things wouldn't get complicated. Isabel needed your share of the wedding fund." "And you're not planning anything soon, right?" I froze at my desk. "What do you mean?" "Grandma made it very clear. That was mine." My mom laughed softly, as if I was being unreasonable. "Oh, Amanda, you don't need a fancy wedding. A girl like you getting married? I think that money should go to someone who really needs it. Your sister is starting a family after all." My heart pounded in heavy beats. "It's not about the money, it's about respect. It was Grandma's decision. It was the only thing in my life I knew was meant just for me." My dad chimed in from the other room, voice flat. "You have a career, money, a home. Isabel needs a new beginning, and well, you don't seem too interested in marriage. Don't blow this out of proportion." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just felt an emptiness spreading inside me like slow smoke. I hung up and stared blankly at my computer screen. The presentation I was working on suddenly meant nothing. It felt like a part of me had just been crushed by betrayal from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. They had taken the one thing Grandma left me, a quiet acknowledgement, a subtle act of restoration, and decided it belonged to Isabel because she deserved it more. And once again, I was pushed aside, as if I had never truly been a part of this family. I had always stayed silent, always given in. But this time I knew things would never be the same again. I sat in my small apartment in Capitol Hill, Seattle, sunlight spilling across my desk and onto the computer screen. My inbox was open. The cursor blinked at the end of the message. Every word I had typed felt like a cut into my own memories. Not because it hurt, but because I was finally strong enough to stop. "I know about the wedding fund. I know you used my share to pay for Isabel's wedding without asking. This isn't just about money, it's about the lack of respect that's existed since I was a child and still continues today. I'm no longer trying to be seen or loved. Don't contact me unless it's to return what belongs to me, Amanda." I read it 3 times, not a single word extra, no apology. Then I hit send. After that, I opened my contacts and deleted one number at a time. Dad, Mom, Isabel. No shaking hands, no hesitation. Then I moved on to social media, blocking anyone who might become a bridge for excuses to find their way back to me. I no longer had the energy for phrases like, "They're still your parents," or "Come on, your sisters, don't make it a big deal." It was time I chose peace, not agreement, in pain. That night, I started something I once thought I didn't need: therapy. I found a therapist named Clara Monroe who specialized in working with adult women carrying childhood wounds. In our first session, I sat across from her in silence, for a long time before finally speaking. "I don't even know what I'm feeling. I'm so tired." Clara didn't interrupt. She just nodded and said one sentence that nearly made me cry. "We don't have to be strong for 29 years just to earn rest." Each session after that, I slowly unfolded memories I had carefully tucked away and buried deep. I began to look at my childhood with different eyes, clear, without blame toward myself. I no longer saw myself as too sensitive, like my mother used to say. I was just a child who hadn't been loved the way she deserved. A few months later, I found a small craftsman-style house in West Seattle. It had a backyard, olive green walls, and a porch, just wide enough for afternoon reading on the weekends. When I signed the contract, I didn't call home to share the news. I didn't need anyone's validation anymore. I decorated the house in my own way, simple but warm. No family photos, instead pictures of me with my friends from work, the people I now consider my real family. There was Jillian, my best friend from college, who helped me move and brought homemade cookies. Luis, a coworker who could read me with just a glance, and Marianne, the older neighbor who always brought me orange marmalade when she saw I came home late. These people weren't related by blood, but they remembered my birthday, listened without comparing me to anyone, and never made me feel like I was second best. One autumn evening, I sat in the living room, wrapped in a charcoal gray blanket, holding a cup of hot mint tea. It was drizzling outside. I opened my laptop and wrote in my journal, a new habit since starting therapy. "I'm living a life that needs no explanation. I'm not a copy of anyone. No longer a shadow. No longer a backup plan. I am Amanda." And just then, my phone lit up. Isabel was calling. I stared at the screen. Her name appeared with a glowing beach wedding photo as the profile picture. A part of me hesitated. But then, I took a deep breath and hit decline. After that, I went into the block settings and added her name. For good this time. I don't know if they'll ever feel remorse. I don't need to know. What I do know is, for the first time in my life, I stood up and chose myself. And no one can take that away from me now. 2 years have passed since the day I sent that final email to my parents. In that time, I've lived a life I once only dreamed of. Peaceful, purposeful, and no longer weighed down by invisible expectations. I was promoted to Director of Development at Nurix Labs the day I turned 30. The company's stock surged after a successful IPO, and I now had the financial means to begin expanding our engineering team internationally. It was all my achievement, owed to no one, dependent on no one. Then one September afternoon, during a strategy meeting with the executive team, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. It was Uncle Alan, my mother's younger brother. We rarely spoke, so I had a sinking feeling something was wrong. I excused myself and answered. "Sweetheart, it's me." His voice was thick with emotion. "Your parents, they were in a car accident. A pickup ran a red light and hit them at the old church intersection. It's not looking good." I gripped the phone, trying to keep my voice steady. "How are they now?" "Your dad's in critical condition. Internal bleeding. The doctors say he needs emergency surgery. Your mom has fractured ribs and a broken wrist. They still don't have health insurance, Amanda, and the bills are piling up." I don't remember what I said next, just that I couldn't focus on the rest of the meeting. That entire evening, I sat on the couch under the soft yellow light, my thoughts tangled like a knotted string. I'm not heartless. Despite the broken relationship, I still remembered the sound of my mother's laughter reading me fairy tales, and my father's rough but steady hands teaching me to ride a bike. But I also remembered the countless moments they abandoned me when they should have been there, and most recently, how they took what was rightfully mine without even asking. The next day, I got a message from Isabel. Long, formal, full of words like conscience, family, forgiveness. But it all led to one sweetened plea. Amanda, I know I was wrong, but this time our parents really need you. Evan and we can't afford the hospital bills. This is your chance to prove you're the bigger person, the good daughter. I didn't reply. A day later, my mother called. Before I could decline the call, I heard her faint voice. Amanda, I know I haven't always been right, but now, your father needs surgery. We don't have much time. You're the only one who can help. I closed my eyes. That voice once lulled me to sleep, but today it no longer brought warmth. Instead, it triggered a reel of memories, of being pushed aside again and again. And again, I set the phone down, turned on speaker, and said, softly but firmly, I'm not this family's bank. Silence hung on the other end. Then my father's voice broke in. We're family, Amanda. Family helps each other. I let out a short laugh, bitter, almost hollow. Then where was family when you used my inheritance for Isabel's wedding? When you missed my graduation because you were helping her pick out curtains? Where was family then? My mom started crying. But this time, I didn't waver. I'm not blaming you for the accident, but I'm also not obligated to pay for every mistake you've made. If you need help, ask the person who's been prioritized for 30 years. I ended the call. There was no anger, just a cold clarity. I knew I'd be judged. I knew relatives might turn on me. But I also knew I couldn't back down this time. That night, I made an anonymous donation to the hospital through a regional medical relief fund. Just enough so their treatment wouldn't be cut off, but with no trace linking it to me. I didn't do it because they deserved it. I did it so I wouldn't owe myself anything. That evening, I returned from a partner meeting in Bellevue. A light rain had started falling in Seattle, fog curling around the porch. I took off my coat and was just about to make myself a cup of tea when the doorbell rang. No warning, no message. I glanced at the doorbell camera screen. Isabel. Her blonde hair perfectly curled, makeup flawless like she'd just stepped out of a magazine shoot. In her hand was a Hermes Birkin bag, the kind that costs more than the car I drove in college. I didn't need to open the door to know why she was here. I opened the door, standing in the entryway, my voice calm but unwelcoming. What are you doing here? Isabel forced a tight smile, trying to appear casual. We need to talk. Do you have a few minutes? I stepped aside, not out of courtesy, but because I wanted to get this over with quickly. Isabel walked in, her eyes scanning my apartment, the one she once mocked as lifeless for lacking artwork or warm colors. Your place? Still as cold as your personality, huh? She gave a soft laugh, placing her bag on the armchair. I didn't respond. I simply sat across from her. Go ahead. I'm not in the mood for more excuses. Isabel took a deep breath and began, voice steady. Mom and Dad are really on the edge, Amanda. I know. We have a complicated past, but this isn't the time to hold grudges. They need surgery, physical therapy. You have the means. You could save them. I tilted my head, keeping my eyes fixed on hers. What about you? Why aren't you helping? She looked away briefly, then replied slowly. James doesn't want to get involved. He just invested in a big project and, you're financially independent, but I let out a soft, biting laugh. You can't touch your husband's account, but you had no problem spending my money on your wedding. Isabel flushed, but tried to keep her composure. That's in the past, Amanda. I stood up, walked to my desk, opened my laptop, and turned the screen toward her. You want to know if I could help? Here's what I'm holding. My account balances, company shares, investment returns. I could pay for all their medical expenses without blinking. But I won't. Isabel stared at the numbers on the screen, her face going pale. I closed the laptop, my voice lower. Not because I hate them, but because this is the result of decades of bad choices, made by them and by you. I was just doing what Mom and Dad taught me, Isabel mumbled. You've always tried to separate yourself from the family. I narrowed my eyes. No, I just wanted to be seen as a person, not a shadow. Isabel stood, her voice starting to shake. So, this is your revenge, letting them lose everything? I paused for a moment, then said, It's not revenge. It's breaking out of a toxic cycle. They taught you that my existence was a mistake. Now they need me. But I'm not the backup plan anymore. She walked toward the door, clutching her luxury bag like it was the last shred of dignity she had left. Before stepping out, she turned and said softly, You'll regret this when they're gone. I answered, calmer than ever. What I regret is spending so many years trying to become someone they never wanted. The door closed behind her. I sat down and poured myself a glass of red wine I had aged since last month. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Inside, I felt no turmoil, no anger, no regret. Less than a week after the tense encounter with Isabel, the family group chat suddenly came back to life after 2 years of silence. The instigator was Aunt Linda, my mom's younger sister. Her first message was a long paragraph filled with exclamation points. Amanda, I can't believe you could be so cold. Your parents raised you, paid for your education, and now you turn your back on them over some past disagreement? Immediately, messages from other relatives poured in, like everyone was racing to judge me. Some called me ungrateful. Others said I was using success as an excuse to look down on family. Even a cousin I'd barely spoken 3 words to jumped in. No matter what happened, you don't abandon your parents in a crisis. Family is everything. I read each message, completely unmoved. Instead, I opened a folder I had prepared in advance. In it were scanned copies of Grandma's inheritance papers, clearly stating the wedding fund was to be split evenly between me and Isabel. I included bank statements showing the money was withdrawn just weeks before her wedding. I also attached a screenshot of a message Isabel had sent me. I know I used your share, but I promise I'll pay it back after the wedding. It's just not the right time, now. And finally, I included a financial breakdown. Not to brag, but to show that I could help. I simply chose not to, because I had been hurt for too long, and didn't want to continue the cycle. I sent it all to the group chat, with no explanation. No one said a word for 3 days. The once bussy chat fell silent like a room with the lights switched off. On the 4th evening, one person responded. Andrew, my uncle's oldest son, the only one in the family who went to the same university as me. He sent just one line. You really did it. Proud of you. I stared at the screen. A strange warmth crept in through the tension of the past days. Sometimes, one person understanding you is enough. After the group chat went quiet, I knew I had reached the end of the old chapter. I opened a real estate app and listed my Seattle apartment for sale, the place I once thought would be my first true home. But now, it was just a memory. I needed a fresh start, untainted by past wounds. 3 weeks later, the apartment sold for more than expected. With that money, plus steadily rising shares from the company, I accepted the offer to transfer to Nurex Labs' new branch in Austin, Texas. A vibrant, fast-growing city in the tech world, and more importantly, a place with no painful memories. The morning of my move, I stood in the empty apartment, autumn sunlight filtering through the curtains. I took one last look around, my hand brushing the arm of the chair where I'd spent nights writing development plans for my team. I didn't cry. I smiled. That afternoon, I boarded a direct flight to Austin. My suitcase wasn't heavy, just a few clothes, my laptop, and an old book from my grandmother I always kept with me. Everything else was new. New job, new apartment, and a life entirely of my own making. The apartment in Austin was a compact penthouse, but with a wide balcony overlooking Lady Bird Lake. That first night I played some soft jazz, poured a glass of white wine, and opened the windows to let the evening breeze in. I no longer heard my mother's voice in my head, no longer saw my father's critical gaze or Isabel's smug smile. Instead, I heard my own laughter, echoing in a space that belonged to no one else. I had chosen freedom, and this time I wasn't looking back. From a child seen as a shadow, I had stepped into my own light. I no longer sought approval from those who never truly loved me. Now, I live a life I chose. No permission needed, no strings attached. What I've been through didn't make me bitter. It made me strong, clear-eyed, and firm in knowing my worth. Family isn't where you're born. It's where you're respected and uplifted. And I've finally found that place. Starting with myself.